Part 3. The morning was gray and heavy. I hadn't slept much that night, my mind still stuck on what Bill had said and on what I saw in the woods. Something had watched me. I was sure of it. I packed my things and stepped outside. My first instinct was to leave town, just get in my car and go. But something in me resisted. I needed to understand what was happening here. As I walked to my car, I noticed something odd. Across the parking lot, there was an old pickup truck parked near the edge, and two local men were loading it with large, heavy sacks covered with a tarp. The shape underneath was irregular, like they were hauling large animal carcasses. I stopped, watching them. One of the men, tall and scruffy with a beard, noticed me staring. He nudged his buddy, and they both fell quiet for a second. "Morning," the bearded one called out, trying to sound casual. "You heading out of town?" "Maybe," I replied, glancing at the sacks. "What's that?" The two men exchanged a brief, tense glance. The other one, stockier and older, forced a grin. "Venison. Bagged a few deer last night," he said. "We're, splitting it up between some folks." I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about the way he said it felt off, like he was rehearsing a line. I didn't press further. Within a minute, they loaded the last sack, climbed into the truck, and drove off, leaving me with a gnawing, uneasy feeling in my gut. I didn't leave that day. I couldn't. Something wasn't right, and I needed to know what it was. I spent most of the day driving around town, trying to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. Maybe it really was just deer meat. Maybe the guys were just acting weird because I was a stranger asking questions. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was off about this town. Around noon, I stopped at a small diner just off Main Street. It was one of those places that felt untouched by time. Faded yellow walls, old wooden booths, and a handwritten menu on the wall. The same bearded guy from the motel parking lot was there, sitting in the corner with two other locals. When he noticed me walk in, his eyes darted away, like he was deliberately avoiding looking at me. I sat at the counter and ordered coffee. Behind me, I could hear the three men talking in hushed voices, but the moment I turned my head to glance at them, the conversation died. They just stared at their plates, eating in silence. After a while, the bearded man got up, said something low to his friends, and left. Through the diner window, I saw him get into his truck, the same one from that morning, and drive off down the road. Something about it felt deliberate, like he didn't want me to see where he was going. I paid my bill and decided to follow him. I kept my distance, trailing him carefully. His truck took a winding road leading out of town, eventually turning onto a dirt path that disappeared into the forest. I hesitated, then followed. About a mile in, I came to a small clearing. The truck was parked there, but the man was gone. In the clearing were several large animal carcasses, deer mostly, laid out on the ground like they had been prepared. The smell of blood and rot was overwhelming. But what caught my attention most was the huge, crude wooden structure in the middle of the clearing, like some kind of feeding station. Large bones, stripped of meat, were scattered around it. The ground was stained dark with old blood. I suddenly felt exposed, like I had walked into something I wasn't supposed to see. Then I heard a sound behind me, a low, heavy thump, like something massive shifting its weight. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just slowly backed toward my car, trying to keep my breathing steady. When I finally got in and started the engine, I risked one quick glance toward the clearing. I swear to God, I saw something move in the tree line. Something huge, something watching me. I hit the gas and didn't stop until I was back in town. I spent the rest of the afternoon holed up in my motel room, pacing back and forth, my mind replaying what I had seen in the clearing, the feeding station, the carcasses, and that thing in the tree line. I couldn't rationalize it anymore. This wasn't just paranoia. Something was happening in this town, and the people here knew about it. Worse, they were a part of it. I thought about calling the police. Hell, I thought about calling anyone. But what would I even say? "Hi, I'm a stranger in town, and I think the locals are feeding deer carcasses to a giant monster in the woods?" Yeah, that'd go over well. As the sun began to set, I made up my mind. I was going to confront someone. Not the two men from earlier. They'd clam up immediately. But someone. Maybe the woman who worked the front desk at the motel. She seemed decent enough. Maybe she'd slip up. I walked over to the motel's small office, heart hammering in my chest. The woman, a lady in her late 50s named Marlene, smiled politely when I stepped in. "Hey there," she said. "Need fresh towels or something?" "No," I said quickly, trying to sound casual. "Just had a question, actually, about the town." Her smile froze ever so slightly. "Oh? Yeah, I saw something earlier, out near the edge of town. A couple of guys hauling meat. Looked like whole deer carcasses." Marlene's face didn't change, but I noticed how her hand twitched slightly, like she wanted to grab something or steady herself. "Yeah, folks hunt a lot around here," she said flatly. "Sure," I nodded. "But it's odd, you know? I mean, they were taking it out into the woods, not to a butcher or anything." Marlene's smile wavered, just a fraction. "Maybe they have a spot they like. Happens all the time." I could feel her clamping down, shutting me out, so I leaned in. "Look, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think there's something in those woods. I think people here know about it, and I think they're feeding it." For a long moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at me, eyes dark and unreadable. Then, very softly, she said, "You should probably leave." My stomach dropped. "What?" "You've been asking a lot of questions, poking around places you shouldn't be. That's not good." She sighed heavily, looking genuinely sad. "Look, you're not from here. I get it. But sometimes it's best to mind your own and move on, before you get yourself into something you don't understand." I opened my mouth to respond, but she was already walking toward the back office. Before she disappeared, she added, "Get some rest. Leave in the morning. Don't go near the woods again." The door clicked shut behind her. I was left standing there, cold dread settling in my chest. They knew. All of them. And none of them were going to help me. I didn't sleep that night. Even as I lay in bed, the walls felt too close. I couldn't stop thinking about Marlene's words. "Don't go near the woods again." I kept replaying her voice in my head. Something in it was resigned, almost apologetic. She wasn't warning me out of fear. She was warning me because she knew I was already too deep in. Whatever was happening here, I was caught in it now. I wasn't leaving. Not yet. I had to know the truth. The next morning, I decided to follow up on my lead. I needed more answers, and the only way to get them was to keep digging. I made a mental note not to go back to the clearing, but I wasn't going to let fear stop me. I couldn't. I drove around town again, looking for anything unusual. As I passed a row of houses on the outskirts, I noticed another truck parked by a shed behind one of the properties. This one was different. It wasn't old, but the bed was full of thick, wrapped bundles, just like the ones I had seen before. I parked a ways down the road and watched. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the residents of the houses nearby came out, carrying large coolers and boxes. They walked toward the truck, exchanged a few words with the man unloading it, and took the bundles back to their homes. I knew I had to get closer. I didn't trust myself not to make a scene, but I couldn't back down. I parked a block away, keeping my distance. This time I was sure they were all in on it. The meat wasn't just for the townspeople. It wasn't just about feeding the hungry. It was about keeping something quiet, something dangerous. I watched as they all disappeared back inside their homes, and then slowly, I followed one of the men. He led me down a narrow path behind his house, thick with trees. I wasn't sure how long I'd been walking, but the deeper we went into the woods, the more the air felt charged, heavy, like something was waiting. Then ahead, I saw a shadow move. It wasn't a person. It was far too big, too fast. I stopped in my tracks, heart pounding. The man ahead of me seemed unfazed. He didn't even glance back as he kept walking. I felt a wave of terror. I was too close now, but it was too late. I couldn't turn back. The man reached the edge of a clearing, and I kept my distance, hiding behind the thick trunks of trees. What I saw next made my blood run cold. The clearing was filled with the remains of animals, not just deer, but larger creatures too. And in the center of the clearing, standing tall, was something enormous. Bigfoot. Its eyes gleamed in the low light, and it let out a low growl as it stepped closer to the man. He didn't flinch. He reached into a cooler and pulled out a slab of meat, holding it up for the creature. It took the offering with ease, swallowing it whole without hesitation. I couldn't breathe. I was frozen, but I couldn't look away. I stayed absolutely still, my heart pounding in my chest. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to move. The creature in the clearing was like nothing I had ever imagined. It wasn't the mythic Bigfoot of local folklore or some half-formed shadow. It was real and terrifyingly alive. Its massive frame loomed in the dim light, its fur matted and dark. Its eyes, wide and glinting with an unnerving intelligence, locked onto the man. The man didn't seem scared. He didn't even flinch as the creature approached him. He simply stood there, holding the meat out, as if feeding this thing was the most natural thing in the world. The creature sniffed the meat, then grabbed it in a single swift motion, its clawed hand tearing through the packaging like it was paper. It chewed the meat with the kind of hunger that felt animalistic, primal. The growl that escaped its throat was deep and rumbling, like the growl of a bear, but it was far more menacing. I barely dared to breathe, but I couldn't look away. I had to know. I had to see what happened next. The man turned and gave a low whistle, signaling something I couldn't see. Another figure emerged from the trees. Another man. This one had a large cooler with him, and he walked confidently toward the creature. He didn't seem startled at all by its presence. They didn't even acknowledge me. To them, I was invisible. They just went about their business, offering the creature more meat, preparing it as if it was a routine. I felt sick to my stomach. The meat wasn't just for the creature. They were feeding it, yes, but they were also taking care of it. This wasn't some isolated incident. This was a system, a secret that had been kept for generations. I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned to leave, but my foot snagged on a branch, and I stumbled forward, crashing into a pile of dead leaves. The sound was loud, too loud. The creature's head snapped up. Those eyes locked onto me, and for a moment, time stopped. It let out a low, guttural growl, its muscles tensing. I knew it saw me. I could feel the weight of its gaze, and I couldn't breathe. The men immediately turned, their eyes narrowing. "What the hell are you doing here?" one of them barked. I backed up, my heart racing. The creature was still watching me, its eyes never leaving mine, its breath heavy and hot in the air. The men seemed more concerned with me now than with the creature. "You don't belong here," the second man growled, stepping toward me. "You don't know what you're dealing with." I didn't know what to say. I couldn't think straight. My body was on autopilot, my mind screaming at me to get out. "You're too far in now," the first man said, his tone colder. "You need to leave. Now." The creature made a low, threatening sound in its throat, and the men quickly backed away, looking at me with something almost like pity. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and ran, not looking back until I reached the safety of my car. The engine roared to life as I sped away from the clearing, my hands shaking on the wheel. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, my mind reeling with everything I had just witnessed. The clearing, the creature, Bigfoot, it wasn't just a myth. It was real. And the people here, they were feeding it, caring for it. I couldn't understand it. Why were they doing this? Why were they protecting this thing, hiding it from the outside world? I wasn't sure where I was going, but I needed to get out of town. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was the cold, hard realization that I had seen something I shouldn't have. Either way, I couldn't stay here anymore. I turned the car toward the motel. I needed to gather my things and leave before things got worse. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed something odd. Marlene, the woman who worked at the front desk, was standing outside the office, looking at me with a strange expression. It wasn't the usual polite smile. It was something more serious. I parked the car and got out, hesitating for a moment. I had a feeling she knew I'd been out there. She must have known. She didn't wait for me to speak. "You saw it, didn't you?" Her voice was quiet but firm. I didn't answer. There was no point in lying. "I told you," she continued. "You don't belong here. This place isn't like other towns. The people here, they've made their peace with things." She paused, glancing nervously over her shoulder as if making sure no one was listening. "Made their peace?" I asked, the words feeling strange on my tongue. "Not everyone understands it," she said, taking a step closer. "But we do what we have to keep things in balance. Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, it's part of this place. We've been feeding it for years. We don't ask questions, and it doesn't ask anything from us. It keeps to the forest, and we keep to the town. That's how it's always been." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "But what happens if someone doesn't leave it alone?" I asked. Her gaze softened, and she stepped closer still, lowering her voice. Then it gets curious. And when it gets curious, it gets hungry. I shuddered at the implication. You're not from here, she said, her tone turning almost sympathetic. And I know you have questions, but some things are better left unanswered. People disappear around here. You've seen the signs. Trust me, it's better if you leave before you're one of them. The words hung in the air between us. I knew she was trying to help, trying to save me from whatever this was. But I didn't know if I could leave. I had already seen too much. Are you saying it will come after me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at me with a hard expression, one that spoke of years of silence and secrets. You already saw it. It knows you're here, and if you don't leave now, it'll make sure you do. I couldn't take it anymore. My head was spinning, and I had to get out. Thanks for the warning, I said, backing toward my car, but I can't just leave without knowing more. Her eyes hardened, a silent plea in them. Then you won't leave at all. The door to the office slammed shut behind her, and I was left standing there, a sick feeling growing in my chest. The town had a secret, one that was deep and dangerous. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep digging without becoming part of it. I took a deep breath and climbed into my car, staring at the road ahead. I sat in the car, staring blankly ahead at the empty road, feeling like I was trapped in a maze with no way out. Marlene's warning still echoed in my mind. You won't leave at all. I thought about what she said, and the weight of it pressed down on me. It felt like every corner of the town was closing in. Every street, every face, every building had become a reminder that I was an outsider. They knew what I was looking for. They knew I had questions they weren't willing to answer. And now I could feel the fear creeping in. Not just my own, but theirs too. The fear that comes when secrets are too big to hide. It was like I was an open target now, and they were watching me. I started the car, pulling out of the motel parking lot, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the town itself was suffocating me. I had to leave. I had to find somewhere safe to think, but the fear was too real. I couldn't go back to the motel. Not anymore. Every time I walked in, I felt eyes on me, listening, waiting for me to make a mistake. I couldn't go into the bars either. The people there, the locals, had made it clear that they didn't want me digging into things. I had seen the way they looked at me, like I was a threat. They weren't afraid of Bigfoot or whatever it was lurking in the woods. No, they were afraid of me, of what I might uncover. I could almost feel their eyes on me, even now. Watching from behind curtains, peering from darkened windows. I had been trying to find answers, but the deeper I went, the more isolated I became. I couldn't trust anyone. Not Marlene. Not the people in the bars. Not even the motels. They all knew. They had to. I turned the car onto the main road, but my mind wasn't focused on the drive. My eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following me. I had to find answers, but now it seemed that even asking the wrong questions was dangerous. The more I thought about it, the more the sense of dread grew. Everyone knew. The people who had fed Bigfoot all these years. The ones who had kept it hidden. They weren't going to let me walk away. They couldn't. I pulled over at a gas station on the edge of town. The place looked abandoned, like no one had been inside for years. The pump was old, rusted, but something about it felt like a momentary escape, away from prying eyes, away from the suffocating grip of the town. I had to get away. I kept my head low as I paid for the gas, avoiding eye contact with the man behind the counter. He didn't say anything, but I could feel the tension in the air. He knew. They all knew. When I got back into the car, the sense of paranoia was almost overwhelming. I couldn't go back to the motel. I couldn't stay in the town any longer. I wasn't just a stranger anymore. I was a threat. I couldn't help but think of the warnings I had been given. Don't go into the woods. Don't ask questions. You'll disappear just like the others. I knew what I had to do, but I wasn't ready to face it. The truth had become too much, and the fear of what I'd uncovered felt suffocating. I had to leave before I became part of the town's dark secret. I couldn't bring myself to go back to the motel. It felt like stepping straight into a trap. Every corner of this town had turned against me, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could stay without making things worse. The sense of danger had seeped into my bones, and I needed to get out. But not tonight. I needed to think. So I parked my car on the outskirts of town, just under a streetlight that flickered intermittently, casting long, eerie shadows over the dirt road. The night was still, save for the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind, and I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, just staring out at the darkened town. The isolation felt almost suffocating, but it was better than being surrounded by people who knew more than they let on. I knew they were all part of it, every single one of them. They all knew about Bigfoot. They all knew the truth. My hands trembled slightly as I fumbled with the glove compartment, pulling out the stack of old newspapers I'd collected earlier. The stories were mostly local fluff, advertisements, wedding announcements, and the occasional crime report. But I had a feeling there was something buried in these papers, something that could explain all the disappearances. Flipping through the yellowed pages, I began to focus on the articles about missing people. They were all the same. Vague, with little to no detail, the cases quickly dismissed as unexplained. But as I read deeper, something stood out in one of the older papers, tucked away in the back. It was a story from years ago about a man named Jacob Harrow, an elderly resident of the town who had gone missing, though the newspaper proclaimed he had been found some days later, confused and disoriented. His story, however, had been different. According to Harrow, he had seen a large, hairy creature in the woods, something more than human. He described it in vivid detail, speaking of its eyes, its size, and its terrifying strength. The town had dismissed his claims, calling him senile and accusing him of making up stories to get attention. But something about the way he described the creature, it felt familiar. The article was written as if to mock him, calling him an attention-seeking old man. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he had known something, something the town wanted to keep hidden. It was as if they had purposefully discredited him, ensuring that his story would be buried with him. The more I read, the more I felt like I was uncovering a thread, one that would lead me straight to the heart of this twisted secret. But the more I read, the more I realized how deeply the town had tried to bury the truth. Harrow wasn't the only one to have seen the creature. His story was just one of many, and they had all been carefully erased from memory. I closed the newspaper with a heavy sigh, rubbing my eyes. The weight of everything that was happening in this town was pressing on me. I'd been right to be scared. They weren't just hiding Bigfoot. They were covering up something much worse. But now I had a decision to make. If I was going to leave, I had to leave now. I couldn't stay any longer. The townspeople had already seen me as a threat, and if they hadn't already decided to silence me, they would soon. It was only a matter of time. I turned the key in the ignition, the car engine humming to life. The headlights flickered, casting long shadows down the empty street as I backed out of my parking spot. The road stretched before me, and as much as I wanted to escape, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already too deep into this mess. I had seen too much. The town felt colder now, more distant, like a place that had been frozen in time. The moment I'd read Harrow's name, I knew I couldn't leave without finding out more. There was something in his story that felt different, something that connected the dots in a way nothing else had. I didn't know if he was still alive or if he'd even welcome a visitor, but something told me that if there was any chance he knew more, anything more, I had to take it. I glanced at the rearview mirror, making sure no one was tailing me as I left the outskirts of town, and turned toward the road that led to the edge of the woods. Harrow's house, if it was still standing, was supposed to be on the far side of town. The small-town library had mentioned it, buried in a list of old addresses, and it seemed like a long shot. But there was something tugging at me, some quiet force telling me that I had to find him. Maybe he had seen something more. Maybe he'd been one of the few who didn't let fear silence him. Maybe, just maybe, he was the last person who knew the truth. The drive felt longer than I expected, the road narrowing as the buildings faded behind me. The streetlights thinned out and the sounds of the town disappeared, replaced by the eerie silence of the wilderness. I was almost out of the city limits. The houses on this side of town were spaced farther apart, some crumbling and abandoned, others well kept, with a strange, uneasy stillness hanging in the air. I pulled up to a modest house at the very edge of the road. It looked old, a little worn down, But the garden was neat, and there was a small porch with a few rocking chairs on it. The kind of place you could imagine an old man sitting on, staring out at the trees. I parked the car across the street, just out of view. Part of me wanted to turn around, to drive away. I had little hope that he'd still be here, or even alive, and I didn't want to risk being caught snooping around. But I had come this far. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car, my feet crunching softly on the gravel. I hesitated for a moment at the foot of the porch, staring at the faded wooden door, but then I pushed the thought aside. I had to know. I knocked. The sound echoed through the stillness. No one answered at first, and I felt a pang of doubt. Maybe he was gone. Maybe the house had been abandoned. But then, after what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open slowly, revealing an elderly man standing in the doorway. His eyes were tired but sharp, and his face was weathered, with deep lines that spoke of years spent outside in the elements. He was still strong, though, his posture steady, his presence commanding in its own quiet way. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. He spoke first. "You've come looking for the creature, haven't you?" His voice was raspy, but there was no mistaking the gravity in his tone. He didn't ask who I was or why I was here. It was as if he had been expecting me. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You were right, weren't you? About the thing in the woods." He stared at me for a moment, his eyes narrowing, then slowly nodded. "I tried to warn them, but they didn't listen." "I read your story," I said, cautiously stepping closer. "In the old paper. They said you were crazy, that you were making it up, but you were telling the truth, weren't you?" The old man didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped aside, motioning for me to enter. His house smelled of old wood and herbs, like a place that had been untouched by time. The walls were lined with photographs of family, most of them faded and worn. "Come in," he said softly. "I've got a lot of stories to tell, if you're willing to listen." I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a soft thud. There was a sense of quiet resignation in the air, like this place held more history than I could ever understand. He gestured to a worn armchair by the fire and sank into the one opposite it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. But then, he broke the silence, his voice low and serious. "You're in more danger than you know," he said. "You're asking the wrong questions, poking at things that should never be disturbed. I've seen the creature. I know what it is. I know what it does. And I know that once it knows you're looking, it won't let you go." The weight of his words settled into my chest, and I felt the deep chill of realization. It wasn't just Bigfoot. There was something else at play here, something darker. He didn't seem surprised by my questions or my presence. He had been waiting, maybe even hoping, that someone would come to him. "I've got to know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "How do I stop it?" He shook his head slowly, the lines of his face deepening. "You don't. You can't. All you can do is leave, and even then, it might already be too late." I sat there in stunned silence, the truth sinking in. I had already crossed the line. The old man leaned back in his chair, his fingers trembling slightly as he took a long drink from a chipped mug. His gaze didn't leave mine, though it was hard to tell if he was looking at me or through me. He exhaled slowly, as though deciding just how much to share, how much of his soul he would expose to someone like me. "I came here in '72, he began, his voice low and gravelly. "Exactly the year that story about me came out. I was looking for peace, a quiet place to retire, far away from the noise of the city. I didn't know what this town was hiding, but by the time I figured it out, it was too late." He paused, his eyes narrowing. For a moment, I wasn't sure if he was reliving his past or warning me about what lay ahead. When I got here, I thought it was just like any other small town. The people were friendly at first. They offered me work, a place to stay. But there was always something off, something you couldn't quite put your finger on. It was the way they spoke in whispers when they thought no one was listening. The way they avoided certain parts of the woods. The way they treated anyone who asked questions like they were a fool. I shifted in my seat, feeling my stomach tighten. My mind was racing. This was the same town I'd come to, the same place where the people had tried to bury the truth, to silence me. "I began hearing stories," he continued, "about strange things happening in the woods. People would disappear, and it was always the same. No real explanation, just that they were lost. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was just the usual small-town gossip. But then I started to notice something. People were too calm, too accepting. They never seemed worried. They never seemed afraid. His eyes glinted as he leaned forward, his voice lowering even more, if that was possible. So I decided to dig deeper. I started asking around, asking about the disappearances. And that's when they made it clear. They didn't want me asking questions. They didn't want anyone asking questions. I was told to stay quiet. I was told that the truth wasn't something I needed to know, that it was best for everyone if I just minded my business and kept to myself. I swallowed hard, trying to process everything he was saying. It was the same warning I had gotten, the same tension that had followed me since the moment I arrived. "What happened?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. The old man looked down at his hands for a moment, as though weighing his next words carefully. They gave me a choice. Keep quiet and live, or keep digging and face the consequences. I didn't listen. I was foolish. I thought I could uncover the truth. I thought I could expose them for what they were doing. His eyes met mine again, and I could see the regret there, the bitterness of someone who had seen too much and paid the price for it. They warned me again, but I didn't back down, so they made sure I understood. They told me if I didn't stop, there would be consequences. I thought they were just trying to scare me, that it was all some twisted joke, until the day I had to bring the meat. I stared at him, confused. "Meat?" The old man nodded grimly. "I had to bring the meat. Bigfoot doesn't just disappear people for no reason. It's part of the deal. The townspeople feed it. They bring it what it needs. And if you want to be left alone, if you want to survive, you feed it too." I shook my head, trying to make sense of his words. "You're saying they give it meat to keep it away from the town?" "Yes," he replied. "And it's not just any meat. It's fresh. The kind that smells like blood and fear. They bring it to the creature, and in return, it stays in the woods. It doesn't come into the town unless it's hungry. But if you're stupid enough to keep asking questions, or worse, you get too close, it's not just the town that's in danger. It's you." I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "So you had to bring meat? To Bigfoot?" The old man nodded, his face grim. "I had to. I thought I could make a deal with it, show it that I meant no harm. But when I got close, I realized it wasn't a deal you could make. It was a demand. It doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about anyone. It only cares about the food it's fed and the people who feed it." He paused, his expression becoming distant. I left the meat in the woods, and I never looked back. But I knew then that I couldn't stay. The people here, they're part of it. They protect the creature. They feed it. And they'll do anything to keep the secret hidden. Anyone who gets too close, anyone who tries to expose it, gets silenced. I sat back in my chair, a cold sweat creeping down my neck. I had suspected it for a while, but hearing it from his mouth made it feel so much more real and infinitely more terrifying. "You said you left. Why come back?" I asked, trying to piece everything together. The old man looked at me for a long time, his eyes searching mine, as if deciding whether or not to trust me. Finally, he spoke again. "I didn't want to come back," he muttered. "But something called me back. The truth, it never leaves you, son. And once you've seen it, once you know what it is, you can't escape it. They'll never let you forget. And that creature, it's always watching, always listening. It knows when you've seen too much." I felt my throat tighten. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. I wasn't just dealing with a town of secrets anymore. I was dealing with something far older, far more dangerous. I had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the room. The old man's face, etched with years of experience and regret, seemed to sag under the weight of everything he had shared. He stared into the dim light for a moment, as though caught between the past and present. Then, his tired eyes turned back to me, and his voice softened. "You're not the first to come looking for answers," he said, his tone heavy with warning. "I've seen a few like you in my time. People who get too close, who try to uncover what's hidden. Some of them, they thought they could outsmart it. They thought they could bring the creature something, or make it understand." I swallowed hard, feeling the tension in my chest tighten. His words sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Did it work?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The old man shook his head slowly. "No, It didn't work. Not for any of them. You think that if you feed it, if you give it what it wants, it'll leave you alone. But that's not how it works. It's not about appeasement. It's about control. The creature controls everything in this town. It knows who's questioning it, who's looking too hard. It sees you before you even see it. He leaned forward, locking his eyes with mine. And I'm telling you, son, it's not too late for you. You can still leave. You can still get out of here before it's too late. There have been others who escaped. People who saw what I saw, who knew too much. They left. They moved to other states, tried to start new lives, but no one believed them. Their stories were dismissed, their warnings ignored. It didn't matter where they went, but at least they lived. At least they weren't consumed by it. I felt a pang of doubt in my chest, the overwhelming pressure of everything weighing me down. The idea of leaving felt like running, but the thought of staying and digging deeper was worse. Much worse. But how do you know it's not too late for me? I asked, my voice betraying the uncertainty I felt. The old man exhaled, his breath shaky but steady. Because it hasn't come for you yet. It hasn't found you, not like it did the others. But make no mistake, it knows you're here. It knows what you've been asking. It knows you've been watching. And if you don't leave now, it might not let you go. His words were a harsh truth, cold and unrelenting. He stared at me for a long while, as though trying to read the fear that was slowly creeping across my face. You think you can outrun it? You think you can leave and never look back? He asked, almost as if testing me. I'm not saying it'll chase you down, but I'll tell you this. It's not just the creature you need to worry about. The people here will make sure you never speak of it. They'll make sure no one knows what really happens in these woods. I nodded slowly, my head spinning with everything he had said. My plan, my quest for answers was unraveling in front of me, and I had no idea what would be left when it was all over. And if I don't leave? I asked, trying to steady my breath. The old man's face grew darker. Then you'll become part of the story. You'll be the one that disappears, the one no one talks about, the one whose name is erased from the town's memory. The creature won't spare you just because you brought it meat. It'll take what it wants, and that's all. I stood up, my legs unsteady, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I had come so far, but the old man's words hit me harder than anything else had. There was no victory here. There were no triumphs, no great truths to uncover, just a town bound by fear and a creature that thrived on it. Leave, the old man repeated, his voice softer now. It's the only way. Leave this place and never look back. If you do, there's still a chance you can live. You can go somewhere else, start over, but you have to leave now, right now. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even say goodbye. I turned and walked out the door, the weight of everything pressing down on me with every step. The car was waiting for me, just across the street, and as I slid into the driver's seat, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I had wanted answers. I had wanted the truth. But now I understood what it meant to be free of it, to leave everything behind. But even as I started the engine and pulled away from the old man's house, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, that Bigfoot was watching, that the town was watching, and that maybe, just maybe, it was already too late for me to escape. The engine hummed steadily beneath me as I drove away from the town, the headlights slicing through the darkness, the buildings, the streets, the faces, everything I had come to know over the past few days slowly faded away in the rearview mirror. I pressed my foot down on the gas, the road stretching ahead like an endless path into the unknown. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The decision to leave had been made, and as much as the weight of the town's secrets lingered in my mind, there was nothing more I could do. I had come here searching for answers, but now I realized that some truths are better left untouched. The road twisted and turned as I left the familiar landscape behind, heading into the wilderness. The trees loomed around me like silent watchers, but their presence no longer held the same terrifying significance. The woods had always been the heart of the mystery, the place where Bigfoot had lived, or so I had believed. But now, there was only quiet. I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to release, the fear that had been gnawing at me for so long gradually fading into the background. The town, its people, and its secrets, they were all behind me now. Whatever happened in that cursed place, I would never have to face it again. There were no strange shapes in the rearview mirror, no signs of something lurking in the trees. Just the dark expanse of the night, the road stretching before me, and the hum of the tires on the asphalt. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace, however fleeting it might be. I didn't know what would happen to the town, to the people who lived there, or to the creature in the woods. I didn't know if anyone would ever uncover the truth, but it wasn't my burden anymore. I had made it out. That was enough. The miles passed in silence, and as I crossed the town's border and entered the open road, I allowed myself a deep breath. It was over. I was leaving it all behind. And with that, I drove into the night, the town and the terror of its secrets fading further into the distance with every passing moment. The end. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories.